Today, we're going to show you how to draw hair. Now, we're going to show you some realistic hair drawings in a minute, but first of all, here's how you can draw cartoon or simplified sketchy hair.
So people always think of sketches as being something so quick and kind of scribbly, but I can see that you're actually putting a lot of thought into where you're putting your strokes, even though it's just a cartoon.
Yeah, I mean, she's got a really kind of rounded hairstyle. And I'm trying to exaggerate that, but because it's so curvy and round, I'm really trying to make my lines curvy as well. But I think what you want to do is you want to go for big shapes, so you can almost squint and see the shapes of her hair, and then exaggerate it a little bit. But you don't want to put much detail in there. How I've drawn the sort of curly bit on the top of her hair is not the same, but it gives that impression of the curl going round.
So I suppose now you're happy with that. You're just kind of tracing over it and refining it a bit with your Sharpie. Is that right?
Yeah, I think never really expect to get it right the first time. Well, I don't anyway. So I'll draw it and then I'll put a piece of paper over the top and keep tracing over until I'm happy. And each time you can just adjust bits a little bit. And I think people sometimes assume, because they see this finished work, that you've just drawn that out and, lined it in, inked it in. But often I bet people have done loads and loads of versions of it.
Oh, yeah. And look at this Adonis of a man. So do you find men or women's hairstyles easier to draw, or is there no preference?
I think there's no preference, but I prefer looking at men. So I've just done exactly the same thing here. If you just squint a little bit at him, and he's got tiny little peaks, if you can see, on his hair. So I just make them a bit sharper. You're going to exaggerate a bit, but create that very, very bold, simple shape.
You've even done that with his eyebrows, actually, haven't you?
Yeah, the whole thing, and his little beard as well. I haven't gone all around sort of up to his chin.
Yeah.
But you're just using that as a reference. And that is one thing I find totally critical, that I can't draw anything without having some sort of reference in front of me. You don't have to make it look exactly like the person, but it's a really good starting point.
It's certainly your style. It's not a portrait of someone, is it? You're using them as a inspiration for something, aren't you?
Yeah, you wouldn't know it was that person there, would you?
So this one, I can see you've already kind of got your faint pencil marks down. Is that how you start sometimes?
Yeah, I always start with pencil, and then all I'm doing is going over it in marker. And you can see again, all I've done is, if you look at the reference image, I've more or less squinted to see those big shapes. And instead of doing each separate strand of hairs, I've just done kind of pointy bits. And I think that's all you need. And once you've drawn in the overall shape, I then just go in and put a few lines in here and there, and then just strengthen up a few areas, so like where the shadow is there.
So Sandra, how would you go about creating realistic hair?
So the biggest mistake that beginners often make is trying to draw every single strand of hair, and you really don't need to do that. All you need is to create the illusion of it, and that's actually quite simple. So first of all, I'll start by indicating the direction of the hair growth with my pencil. So on each section of the hair, I'll just have a look and see where it's falling and just try and follow that. And then once I'm happy with that, I'll use my cotton bud. I could not live without my cotton bud when I'm drawing hair. It's so, so useful. And I'll just blend and soften those lines. And even that alone can really indicate hair without having to draw every single line. And then once I've done that, I'll start redefining the darks, particularly where those sections separate. And then after a while, I'll realise perhaps that I've shadowed some of my highlights a little bit too much. So I'll start lifting them out again with my putty rubber.
Her hair looks really shiny.
Yeah, and that is basically because of those highlights, and also not being afraid to really get into those darks with my pencil. You can use all the pencils you like, but really I did this with one 2B pencil, so it gives a variety of tones. I also use a paper stump, which some people call a torchon, and I use this instead of a cotton bud in certain areas because it's got more of a point, so you can be more definite about where you're going, and doesn't cover quite such an area. And yeah, the shine is created by just really, really defining those darks and then lifting out those lights. And the more contrast you have between the lights and the darks, the shinier the hair will look. And one of the most important things to think about when you're drawing hair is the fact that the hair will cast a shadow across the forehead. And I always use a cotton bud to indicate that. So I'll sort of take a bit of the pencil with the cotton bud from the hair and just kind of blend it into the forehead a little bit, and this really gives it a three-dimensional effect, so you can sort of see it's lifting off of the face.
So what about curly hair? I'd imagine that's a lot more tricky, isn't it?
That's not hard either, because all you've really got to do is observe just how the light hits each individual curl.
So do you still start in roughly the same way for a curl?
Yep, I'm doing exactly the same thing as I did before. I'm starting off with defining the direction of the hair growth with my pencil. As the hair twists, I'm sort of indicating the new direction it's going in. Then I'm going in with my cotton bud to blend those lines to make them soft and appear to be sort of, shinier perhaps. Then I'm going back in and redefining the darks, particularly where the hair is separating. Hair is not perfect, so you really do need to make sure you add those random sort of bits of hair that aren't in the curl and they're falling out, and also the edges of the curl will separate. Then I'm going back in with my eraser just to pull out those highlights a little bit more where the light's hitting the curl. And then I'm taking the time to really darken the shadows that's cast as the hair twists over itself. So you'll see that will cast a shadow on the hair beneath. And you can really just keep going on and on until you achieve the level of realism that you're after.
So remember, drawing hair doesn't need to be difficult. Just start with the larger shapes and work from there.
Don't forget to subscribe. Meanwhile, you can check out the creative challenges we have coming up at www.kickinthecreatives.com. Back soon!